Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to another session of Global Festival of Oneness. Let me begin with a small prayer. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Paramparam Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyaptadeháya Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hare Om. Namaste everyone. We have today Shri Ramesh Venkatraman ji. Very warm welcome to you, Ramesh ji, again on this program. So this will be a concluding session for Ramesh ji's series on Shankara Charitham, a modern retelling. Before I open the floor to him, just a brief introduction again. Ramesh Venkatraman ji presently works as Director, Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, and as faculty at the Vivekananda Institute of Indian Studies. After a 2-decade stint in the corporate world, where he held strategic and leadership positions across the domains of sales and marketing, product management, capability building, and consulting, Ramesh has now been engaged in the development sector for the last 5 years. He is also deeply invested in understanding, practicing, and disseminating the dharmic and cultural heritage of Bharat. Writing is a passion, and he writes regularly in a range of topics spanning from culture, dharma, and management. He is in the process of authoring and publishing 2 books. One is the story of Vishnu Sahasranama, Bhishma's Reflections, and second is Shankara Charitham, a modern retelling. Again, welcome to you, Ramesh. Thank you for taking time for doing this session. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Nitin. I must actually mention, because you know that my internet connection is a little bad today, and so I'm connecting on my mobile hotspot in the sense that Wi-Fi is down. So if there at any point in time you find that the connection is a little weak, I'll switch off my video and then go on the audio.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So, we over the course of the last 3 sessions, we looked at what is the source material for Shankara's works, the multiple sources from which we access all of it. Then we looked at, we went through some of the stories, including how he took brahmacharya, how the avatara itself was, decided, the 2 petitions that went over. One that Shiva must take the avatara, that Mahadeva himself must take a sannyasa avatara here. And then second, also that there must be a vehicle that can actually be able to take the avatara. That is when Shiva Guru and Aryamba get selected as the people who will be able to bring this avatara onto earth. Then we also spoke about Shankara Sannyasa himself. Then we looked at how he then we also did a flashback on Gaudapada and Govindapada. Gaudapada himself living as a Brahma Rakshasa for several years. Govindapada's meeting. Govindapada marrying 4 people from 4 girls from 4 different varnas. How he led a grahastha dharma, and then how he meets up with Gaudapada and how he comes to know from Gaudapada first, and then also Vyasa, that he has to go to this place in Omkareshwar where he will come to meet with the Shankara, how Shankara met with him, how he introduced himself, why he was selected, and how Govindapada. So we came to that. We also briefly touched upon 2 episodes, because the idea is that we cannot go through the entire story in about 4 episodes, because there are multiple. And I also said that we must also look at layers within layers, look at the story as a much layered, as well as the multiple stories and episodes, connections that come from these into the. Now, in the same vein, very interesting anecdote. Nitin and I, we were speaking about it only minutes before we went online. Was the approach that Shankara makes to Mandana Mishra. Now, just before how he even decides that he has to debate with Mandana Mishra itself is a story. For example, because his first choice is to come and meet with Kumarila Bhatta, and Kumarila is the great Karma Kanda Pandit. He has conquered everything. Mandana Mishra is Kumarila's disciple. Now Kumarila, has decided to immolate himself in a fire that he has Agni for two sins that he says he has committed. One is that in order to defeat the Buddhists, he disguises himself as a Buddhist and learns from a Buddhist guru. Names are not mentioned, and therefore he says that is a crime that I committed, so I must suffer for it. And second is, he says the second thing that he did was when he's when the other disciples come to know that he is actually a believer in Veda who has come here only to come in disguise to learn all of the Buddhist philosophy only to refute it later. They throw him off a cliff, hilltop. And while he's being thrown off, he says, if the Vedas are true, then I should survive this fall. And he says, because I prefixed my statement with if, that's a crime. And in fact, Kumarila suffers from blindness in one eye. He says that also is because of this. I should simply say that the Vedas are true, and I will jump off the cliff, and I should never have said that. I should never have doubted the Vedas. So that's the reason why he's going through this ordeal by fire, literally. And when Shankara comes, he says, why don't you teach me Vedanta? And Shankara teaches him Vedanta, and they say that he passed away, he attained moksha after listening to Shankara, and he kept looking at Shankara. But just before he does that, he also tells Shankara that if your philosophy has to stand on a firm footing, you must go to Mandana Mishra. Mandana Mishra, he says, is the foremost, this one of Mimamsa and the Karmakanda one. And he says, unless he accepts you and accepts the Vedanta that you speak of, I don't think your victory is assured. And therefore, Shankara decides to go to Mandana Mishra's place, which is mentioned as Ishamati. Now, as Shankara makes this journey, it's a very interesting kind of journey, the debate itself as well as that. And now Mandana Mishra is extremely wealthy. He's extremely wealthy. He has a huge palatial house, and the entire town has been converted into a kind of where for example, even as Shankara enters the town, he sees that even the women folk who are fetching water for Mandana Mishra or for anybody else are also speaking of the Vedas, of their chanting of, all of those things are happening. And therefore, Shankara asks one of these group of women who are walking where Mandana Mishra's house. They laugh and they say, it's so easy to locate Mandana Mishra's house. Even the parrots there, engage in the Vedas. Now here, when they use the word Shuka, which is the parrot, they say that all of the parrots are female parrots, kind of pointing out to the fact. And so we don't know if it's a reference to themselves or it's a reference to the parrots. But Shankara takes this as the clue, and then they also say, it is the biggest house in the town, so it's very easy for you to locate. When Shankara actually reaches this place, earlier we said how Kumarila, when he wanted to, enter into debate with the Buddhists, he found that they did not want to enter into a debate. In the sense, am I audible? I think, is there a problem? I'm just getting a message. So
okay. Yeah, little bit drag is there, but you are audible.
Okay. At any point in time, I can switch off the video if that helps. Because I think till 10 o'clock, I don't see the Wi-Fi coming up. So as he enters that place, he finds that the doors are shut. You know, there's a huge compound. There's a huge gate that has been shut. And on that particular day, Mandana Mishra is performing the Shraddha ceremony for his parents, which means that because it's a Shraddha ceremony, he doesn't want anybody to enter into the house and all of that. Particularly, given that he is a believer in the Grahastha Dharma and the fact that he wants, he's very clear about, and he has no respect. He actually has disdain for sannyasa, and it's made very clear if you look at any of the histories, be it a hagiographic one like the Madhaviya Shankara Jayanti or any of the Shankara Charithams, you'll find that he has absolute disdain for sannyasa. He says there are people, in fact, he goes to the extent of saying these sannyasis are no different from beggars. All they do is they take those who can't, fend for themselves, their families, and cannot feed themselves, take up sannyasa, have a good meal, because they can get good tasty meals for free. That is Mandana Mishra's stand. I mean, not very different from some of the stands that people take today also. Having said this, now the door is closed. How does he enter? So Shankara approaches this, and there are multiple stories. If you look at the Madhaviya Digvijaya, they say that through Mantra Siddhi, he traveled through the air and simply, went over the wall. Then there is another story which says that being a very young boy and quite physically fit, he clambered over the wall. But these are huge walls, so he clambered over the wall, climbed onto the gate. The third story, which I actually liked, and I found it in the Shankara Charitham spoken of by Kanchipuram Acharya, and also in some of the what you call Sthala Puranas, stories that happen around the place, is that apparently in those days, the toddy tappers and coconut people who used to pluck coconut from the coconut trees had some sort of a mantra siddhi. In the sense they used to sit under the coconut tree from where they wanted, or a palm tree where they wanted the toddy to be tapped or coconut to be plucked, and they would chant this, and the coconut would bend, and the coconut tree would bend and offer its coconut, or offer itself, or the palm tree in that say where toddy offer itself, and they would take what they wanted, and they chant the mantra again, and the tree would go back to its original. This is the story. I liked it a lot because it's not worth to mention. There are multiple mentions across. So Shankara, being Shankara, what he does is he goes to one of the toddy tappers and says, you have to teach me this, because that's the only way I can enter this man's house. He is not letting me in, one, because I'm a sannyasa. He's also doing shraddha, and if he does a shraddha, he do it for several. He's not like how we do it in 1 hour, and he's a believer in doing it completely and all of that. So therefore, you'll have to teach me this mantra, and he learns that mantra. Now they say that in Mandana Mishra's house, the entire compound is lined with these palm trees and coconut trees. Shankara sits in front of the compound wall and chants this mantra. And either the palm tree or the coconut tree bends and he climbs onto it. And then he chants the mantra and it goes back into the compound. Chants it again, it comes down and he is arrived inside the compound. That's a beautiful story that comes in. So which also points to how Shankara was not at all averse to learning from anyone. And in one sense, when people say, Shankara broke several rules, he actually did. So it's not very, it's a really nice story, and found it extremely interesting that Shankara was willing to do this. So the moment he enters, literally he gate crashes this Shraddha ceremony, and Mandana Mishra is absolutely furious. Somebody has gate crashed his house at a time when he is doing Shraddha, and he says, and he finds that, that too a sannyasi has entered. The story also says that Mandana Mishra's Shraddha ceremonies were so elaborate, that he was so dedicated to it, that when he offered the pinda and when he offered food, some of the greatest of sages across the years, they mentioned that on that particular day, both Vyasa and Jaimini both were there in to receive the offerings themselves. Now, the moment he sees this young monk, he says, how did this Mundi enter into this my house? Mundi being he has shaved his head off, right? And he says that's, and today even a widow is, the widow is called a, is referred to as that. And he says, how did this Mundi enter into this house of this, into my house? I've never allowed them in. How did he manage to enter? And Shankara actually, to provoke him, starts to smile and laugh. And then Mandana goes further. He just can't control himself. He gets more and more angry. He says, I don't even want to look at somebody without a shika and a upavita, and particularly on this particular day. So he says, on this particular day, on a normal day itself, I don't want to see somebody without upavita and shika. And on this particular day, I'm disgusted. I don't even want to see. And then he says, from where did you come, you Mundi? He says, shaven-headed fellow. Shankara interprets it as him asking him, how far have you shaven? He says, up to the neck. It's the whole idea is to provoke Mandana into a debate. But Mandana doesn't want to enter into a debate. He just wants to throw Shankara out. He says, up to the neck. He says, that's not what I asked. He said, how did you enter? What is the, I asked you the way. Shankara says, so you ask the way, then you should know the answer. So this is how they go back and forth. Mandana goes ahead and says, have you drunk pittam? Pittam is toddy, right? So Shankara learned the mantra from the toddy tapper. Now, pittam has two meanings. One, toddy, that is, somebody who has consumed alcohol. It also means the yellow color. In Pandis it is called, in Tamil it is called pittam. That you have or when the bile that comes out is yellow. Now there is a double meaning here. That it says that when people say that in English also they say when they are very angry, his bile was, he exhibited his bile, his anger and all of that. So Shankara interprets it like that and says, the pittam is not white, it is actually yellow, he says. And that's how it goes, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And Mandana again loses and says, he goes to the extent of saying, I'm just thinking, we talk of free speech, we talk of barriers to free speech. Look at the kind of dialogue that is done. He says, Shankara, he says, you have abandoned your Agnopavita and your tough because you have too much of a burden. So Madan Mishra says, you who have removed your shika because you find it as a burden, it kind of is heavy on your head. And then you say, you've also given away Yagnopavita. But don't you find the rags that you're wearing, this sannyasa burden? And he goes on to say, you're not finding it a burden only because, it helps you get free food. And you don't have to take any responsibility of the household. I have to take care of my wife, I have children, I have to take care of. You don't have anything, right? You just roam around with your people, and that's what he says. And Mandana further says, the world knows what you much wanted your Brahmanishta is. I know what your Brahmanishta is. It is just to loaf around and claim that you are a Brahmanishta, when essentially what you're saying is that you beg for food. And Shankara retorts by saying, you who only practice the rituals have forgotten the Atmanishta. And this is how it goes, and back and forth. In fact, Mandana goes to the extent of saying, I know who you are. You are the son of a widow and have no rights whatsoever. Since you are the son of a widow, you've taken up sannyasa. And Shankara even then, doesn't get. They go back and forth. At that time is when Vyasa steps in. That's what the Digvijayam says. Whereas in the other places, whereas the other stories also say that Mandana himself realized that this can't happen. You can't have all of these rishis here sitting, and Vyasa also intervenes and says, I don't think you should be doing this, because Vyasa himself, if you remember in the previous episode, I had mentioned that one of the things that Shankara, whose lifespan was only up to the age of 16, his lifespan was doubled to 32 by Vyasa himself. When Vyasa says there is much that you still need to do, and therefore I'm extending your life by another 16 years. That is doubling his life. So Vyasa says this is not the way to behave. So I think you need to be sure. But again, Mandana Mishra says, but there is no place for a sannyasi in a Shraddha ceremony. What do you want me to do? How do you do? That is when Vyasa explains that, there is a Pitrusthanam, there is a Devasthanam, which, the two sannyasi. Then there is a third sthanam that can be given to the sannyasi. It is called the Vishnu sthanam. So look at the connection that comes. Even today, when we do a Shraddha ceremony today, there is a in the Swartha tradition, in many of our traditions, we have what is called a Vishnu Yalai, which means you set aside food, you set aside everything for Vishnu, and there a brahmachari alone can sit, or somebody like that can sit. And therefore he says there is a Vishnu sthana, and he refers to the Vamana avatar. He says, you say that you cannot enter. Vamana entered Daksha Yajna. Vamana entered when you had Bali's, so it's possible. And Mahabali's Yajna. And so he says, so there is a sthanam for this. Make him sit in the Vishnu sthanam. And Mandana says, okay, I cannot, stop them in the beginning, and I don't want to spoil my mood by getting into this kind of a really low-level argument, kind of below-the-belt argument. If you look at some of the other things that they, kind of trade, the barbs and other things. So I said, okay, you sit. So the Shraddha gets completed. Then they decide that they will get into this debate as decided. And in the debate, and Shankara says, so he asks, what is it? He says, I want to move you into the Nivritti Marga. And he says, so the person in the way, so then Mandana asks, so Mandana has no choice. He sat in the Vishnu Sthanam. So he says, what Bhiksha can you offer? And he says, before you say anything, let me offer you Anna Bhiksham, which is what the sannyasi wants. But Shankara stops him. He says, I have not come here for Anna Bhiksham. I want Vada Bhiksham. Very clearly says, that is the only thing that I will accept. I want Vada Bhiksham. That is, I want to get into a Vada, or a debate with you. Now, he has performed Shraddha. He has agreed that he will give Bhiksha to this sannyasi who is asking now for Vada, not Anna. Annam is a normal Bhiksha that is given. And he says, so Mandana has no choice, and he says, okay, I will. Then he says, what are the conditions if you lose? So Mandana, both of them arrive at a condition. They say that if Mandana loses, he will give up Grahastha Ashrama and enter into sannyas. Look at also the openness of Ubaya Bharati, his wife, who is ready to, accept the fact that he can enter into sannyas ashrama. He says, but then he says, Shankara, he tells Shankara that you must enter into Grahastha Ashrama if you lose. Now, there are two stories of what Shankara accepted as part of the debate. There is one that says Shankara accepted that he would become Grahastha, but the second he says is that he had never ever entered into any. He was straight away from a brahmachari, he became a sannyasa. So what he actually accepted, which Mandana also agreed is the right way, he said, since I am a brahmacharya murti and I have been a celibate all my life, what I will do is, if I lose to you, I will do what is called a marananta prayashchitam. Marananta prayashchitam is when, and he says, because anyway, if as a sannyasi I enter into a grahastha ashrama, I am dead, right? And to enter into sannyasa, you have to take a kind of death. You have to break everything from all of the other dharmas. He says the opposite is true. If I, as a sannyasa, I give up sannyasa and enter into grahastha ashrama, it is kind of death for me. So instead, I will choose marananta prayashchitam, and Mandana Mishra agrees that it is the right approach should be taken. So Marananta Prayaschitta is when you don't eat even one morsel of food or a drop of water and die. That is what Shankara agrees to. He says, I will get into Marananta Prayaschitta. And then who is the, already it has been decided. Kumarila himself had said that that Bharati would be the umpire for this debate. And for 21 days, they, with only the normal breaks that are there, they debate 21 days. And where Bharati doesn't know, she says, if supposing my husband wins, people will say that, I was partial. Now, if Shankara wins, they will say, what sort of a wife are you that you made your husband lose, that you passed judgment. So she very carefully says, she makes both of them wear a garland. It says, whosoever's garland first starts to fade and dry and become rotten, they will be the loser. So by the 21st day, Mandana's garland starts to fade away, become the flowers start to rot away and all of that. And that's how this one. And during the debate, there are multiple questions, back and forth, answers and all of that. And in a very important point, in the multiple insults that they could, one of the insults that Vandana Mishra says is that you who have killed the Agnihotra Agni, and in order to take up sannyasa, I have no respect for you. To which, Shankara makes a very, very smart reply. He says, this Agni that you speak of, the external Agni that you have, which is the Agnihotra Agni, I have already transmuted that into an Atma Jnana, into Atma Agni. It burns within me. And that Agni that burns within me is the Jnana Agni. And I have come here to show you the truth of the Jnana Agni. That when the Jnana is when knowledge rises to that level, all of this karma falls on its own, and that will happen to you, he says. So that's how the debate starts. Then you also have some stories mention this, some don't mention it. For example, interestingly, that Saraswati also, Ubaya Bharati, who is actually Saraswati, the avatar of Saraswati, enters into a debate. And she says that, when we have entered into Grahastha Ashrama, there is no difference between the husband and the wife. The husband and the wife are the same. That is why even in the Upasana Agni, it is the wife who divides the rice and gives it, right? And applies the ghee and says, and transfers from one hand to the other and gives it to the husband who puts it into the Agni. And in the absence of the husband, the Upasana karma can be performed by the wife when the husband is traveling, he can't do. So he says, so there is no difference between me and him. If you have defeated me, it means you have defeated only one part of us. You have to defeat us. And therefore, she also realizes that, and she is Saraswati herself. So it's a real debate that's now, and they say that that there is the story. Some of them accept it, some of them don't accept it. And the story is that she finds that she cannot defeat him in the normal course of the debate, and therefore she drags him into the debate on Kusuma Shastra, which is the Shastra of the sexual life, which he has never experienced. He knows theoretical knowledge, but Shankara does not really know. He's a brahmachari, so he does not know. And as per the rules of the debate, if you're not comfortable in the subject or something, you can take a 1 month break. And that's when Shankara, asks for that break and says, I accept that I don't know anything about it, and I do not speak without knowing it myself or experiencing it myself. And that's when he takes that 1 month break. And the story says that there is a king who is dying. The king has a harem, and he enters into just before as they think that the king is dying, Shankara drops his body, and his disciples take care of his body. He enters into the king. The king becomes animated again, and then he learns Kusuma Shastra practically. Right? The Shastra of sexual life again starts to lead that. And they say even that the need for celibacy is so great that the Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam says that for a sannyasi, that somebody has that Shankara is Shambhu himself, who has come, Dakshinamurti himself, who has come as Shankara, that even he forgot his own thing, and his sannyasis had to come, and he had forgotten, and had to come and sing to him in the court. He had started to live as a king himself, forgetting that the real purpose of why he had entered into the king's body. And it says they came and sang to him, saying the story of how there was this sannyasi whose body is up in the hills and it needs to be animated. He has to go to this debate. Very, very similar to the Lavakusha story, Therefore, that is when Shankara suddenly realizes, Shankara, animating the king, realizes where he is now. And he says that moment, for one minute that the king was alive, and the next second he's gone. And Shankara is entered into his body. He goes back, why Bharati accepts defeat. So this is one of the largest sections of this one, because clearly, as Kumrila pointed out, and everybody else knows, that it was Mandana Mishra's turning that meant absolutely, is Mandana Mishra's acceptance of Shankara's Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, is the turning point, because once Mandana Mishra becomes Shrotriya, in fact, in fact, they say that Shrotriya, in fact, looked after all the. In fact, there is also some who say that he looked after Badri, Sringeri, as well as, and he had only one assistant under him. And that itself is another very interesting story, which I'll also touch upon very, very quickly on that. Now, one of the things that, one of the greatest achievements of Shankara as part of his life, I think one which we need to appreciate, is the fact that he did not say that there is only one, that you have to do only Vishnu Puja, Vishnu Bhakti, or Shiva, all of those. He realized, they said there are about 62 to 74 different streams of worship that will happen, and he realized the need to organize things into manageable proportions. So one of the things he did was that is why he's called the Shanmata Stapakar. He who established the 6 streams, starting with Ganapatyam. Kaumaram, Ganapatyam is Ganapati, Kaumaram is Subramanya. Particularly because he realized that Subramanya is very, very popular in southern India. Subramanya, Murugan, Subramanya and Karnataka, Murugan. And then he said, then it is the that is Ambika, as he saw it. Shiva, then Surya Upasana. And then finally Vishnu. So that is the purpose of the Panchayatana Puja. And in doing that, also see the beauty of it. We all say that India was never one country. But look at what he does. Now, one of the things that of the Panchayatana Puja or the Shanmata Puja, the most popular. Now, for example, the rules of the Panchayatana Puja, which all Smartas is expected to do or are supposed to do, is that you can place the Ishta Devata in the middle and the other Devatas, the other 4 Devatas around the Ishta Devata. But what is most popular, if you look at the Sringeri Matam book or the Kanchi Matam book, is that the Shiva Panchayatanam is the most famous. One of the arguments that was being made is that the Shiva Panchayatanam is popular because it is, Shankara was Shiva Avatara and all of these Shiva worships. But that is not the actual reason. Shankara was looking at such early time for looking at how do we bring the whole of the country together in the worship in the upasana of these 6 primary deities. So let's look at what it is. So what he does is, so he says, so the Panchayatana Padati, you need not have, I'm not saying, I can't say don't have, but you need not have vigrahas. One, because it's a Sankshepa Lagu Padati, the sense that everybody needs to do it because it's Nitya Karma, but you have to also factor in the fact that not everybody will be able to do it given their daily work requirements. Therefore, one, it has to be Lagu Padati. Second, instead of using vigrahas, there are naturally occurring stones or material that is used in the puja. And in using it, look at how Shankara manages this. One, he says, Saligrama, which is representative Vishnu, is taken from the Kantaki river in Nepal, just so northern India, right up there. Swarnamukhi or Swarnareka Shila, which is that this stone has a silver line around it, running around it, or a gold line running around it. It's taken from the Swarnamukhi river in Gudu in Andhra Pradesh. You have southern India. Now, Ganesha has worshipped the red stone, which is called the Shonabhadram or Shonapatram. It is in eastern India, in Patna, the Shon River. Interestingly, it is on the banks of the Shon River that we saw in the episode 2, I think, where Ubhay Bharati was born, where she lived, and Vandana Mishra, actually meets her there. The Banalingam, which is so Shonapatram is that, so Shiva. Spatikam is found again in southern India in Ballad. Banalingam is the one that is used for Shiva, which is found in the Narmada and northwestern central India. Now, if you look at the Narmada, it cuts across, and it's the right in the middle of India. Right, it divides India into two halves. In the earlier days, the upper half was called the Gauda Desham. That is why you have the Gauda Saraswats coming from there. And they also populated several layers. And the lower half of the country was called the Dravida Desham. That's why Shankara goes there and he introduced himself as the Dravida Shishu and Gauda Desham. That is why Gaudapada came from Bengal. And therefore, he was called Gaudapada. Gaudapada is his name. The real name is really not known. Some of them say that, what his name was. So Gaudapada, Govinda Bhagavadpada came from Kashmir, and Shankara is from the south. If you look at it, there itself, there is a tremendous. So this is how the Panchayatana Puja. So he says, since the Banalingam comes from central India, the arrangement is exactly like that. Shiva comes in the middle, not because they wanted to bring great, not because Shankara wanted to give great importance to Shiva, which they accuse him of, which is not true. So central India. In that sense, you not only worship the Panchabhutas, you also worship the 4 quarters of Bharata Desha, of this Karma Bhumi, this Dharma Bhumi, that you worship through that on a daily basis. And that is the beauty of the Panchayatana Puja. And we have in the northeast corner, you have Salagamam, which is Vishnu, again coming from. And similarly, it is arranged here. So that is the beauty of the Panchayatana, which he installed, where he also, very, very subtly brought about the need for this one. Now, one of the people, of the many people who started the Kanchi Madam, there's one, people talk of, people know of Sureshwaracharya, Totakacharya, all of these, Padmapada, all of these. But there's one person who, is mentioned only in passing, but seems to have been a very, very important person. He finds mention in many books, and the reference actually came from Western scholars initially. Later, it was studied. I think they found it in Belgium, Germany, and all of those places. And he was called Sarvajñatmar. Now, for a long time, people were wondering why this person was called Sarvajña. So the backstory apparently is this, that there is this Shankara attained the Sarvajña Peetham, where there is an acceptance that he is the greatest of the great, Sarvajñam, that is, he knows all of the knowledge. And just before he attained to that Sarvajña Peetham, there were also multiple debates where people were, it was an open, this one for people to challenge his claim to Sarvajñam. And therefore, there were multiple debates that happened. Some say that there are 2 stories, really not important to us, but they say it happened in Kashmir, and therefore he attained to Sarvajña Peetham in Kashmir near Badrinath and all of this. But there is also this claim that it happened in Kanchi. It really does not matter. One of the reasons, Kanchi is called the Kanchi Kamakoti Peetham is because this. Now, of all the debates that happened, most people of multiple allegiances were defeated in, they say, in a matter of minutes, in a matter of hours, and all of that. But there was one small boy, all of 7 years of age, who was, and they say that this boy whose father had actually come to debate, and father had lost, and this boy starts to debate with Shankara. Brilliant story that is there. And that's why I say, there are multiple stories. This boy debates for Shankara, and Shankara is not able to defeat him for 4 days. All of the seniors, he's defeated in, say, a matter of minutes and hours. This boy goes back and forth, back and forth. What he debated is not there, but there is this. And it is this boy who ultimately, loses to Shankara after 4 days. And Shankara attains to Sarvagnyam. And Shankara, they say, had tears in his eyes when he looked at this boy. Maybe, he thought that this boy is very similar to myself. And he was hardly 9 and this boy was 7. And, there was not all of them had tears in their eyes. And the Sarvagnya Peetam, he attains to only a few years before, he disappears in, Shankara. Nobody mentions how he passed away, died and all of that. So he disappears in Kedar. Now, because after defeating this young boy of 7, he attains to Sarvagnya Peetam. And since he had tears in his eyes when he heard this boy speak, and this one. So this boy became Atmartha to Shankara, somebody who he met for such a short time. And this boy takes sannyasa from Shankara, and Shankara has hardly lived for a year or 2 after this. And because he was Shankara's Atmartha, so close to his Atma, this boy came to be known as Sarvagnyatmar. So the Atmartha of the Sarvagnya became the Sarvagnyat. And they say the Sarvagnyatmar, and because Shankara did not live much longer, lived for very long after this, was completely trained by Sureshwaracharya later in all of that. And this Sarvagnyatmar became, for all practical purposes, the administrative, all of the duties of the Shrigeri Madam, Kanchi Madam also, he was taking care of. This is something that you would find only in some of the records. So this is another interesting story within the story. There is also the mention of somebody called Prithvitva. Who was he? What was Atmartha? So he was also another this one. And they say that, then there is this beautiful story of Totaka himself, of how the Totakashtakam came about. After many people who were there, they say at one point in time, Shankara had 6,000 disciples. He was, kind of this one. Which means also that, and they also say that Shankara did not go to all the places like this. He went all over India, he toured all over India, but in some places he also had assigned some of his disciples to do the debates and all of those things. Now, of all the people, this Totaka, many of his disciples, Totaka never used to speak apparently, because he was, so whenever he looked at Shankara, his tears used to start streaming down his eyes and kind of tongue-tied, he could not speak at all. So many of the disciples actually started to think that, this Totaka is a dull-headed person who really does not know of what he is. And of the many disciples, he's the most, dull-headed person and all that. And he says, but so at one point in time, and Totaka is known as Anandagiri. And we saw in the module in session 1 that Anandagiri is one of the single biggest resources for Shankara's stories. Again, maybe. And in the Totaka Ashram, he says, Bhava Shankara Deshikam Sharanam. That is what he says. All I know is, to lie down at the feet of Shankara. That is all that I know. So even as these people think that he is, this dull-headed person who does not know much, in one of the sessions that Shankara had, in one of these discourses that he has given, Totaka had not come. So as people are waiting to start, Shankara says, let Totaka come. And so all are wondering, why is Shankara, this man is a dull-headed fellow, but why is he waiting for Totaka? At that time, Totaka comes in dancing and singing in a state of absolute ecstasy. He's almost in Samadhi state. And he's singing about Shankara himself, saying, that is the Totakashtakam. He's singing, he's dancing. He says, I know nothing. I'm not interested in all of this philosophy. I'm not interested in this, that. While I understand all of this, all I want to see is all I want is to be at the feet of Shankara. Because he I mean, in the presence of Shankara, all of this fails because he is the very Advaita Swarupam itself. The Advaita Swarupam is that Dakshinamurti is sitting here, and all of us are debating, talking, and all. That's why he says that is when they realize who Totaka is. That his silence has not come from not knowing anything, but because he had transcended to a state where there was no need to say anything. His silence meant that he had transcended already. And that is what Shankara wanted to show. Again, you have the story of Hastamalaka. Now, people all wonder, even Bhishma says in the Vishnu Sahasranamam that when Krishna says, I think it's time for you to start speaking. In the Vishnu Sahasranamam, there is an earlier episode where, there is a Shiva Sahasranamam that occurs. Shiva Sahasranamam is completely chanted by Krishna himself. So people expect Krishna to also chant Vishnu Sahasranam. Then he says, no, it doesn't make sense that I speak of Vishnu Sahasranam. It has to be Bhishma. And when he looks at Bhishma, Bhishma says, Krishna, I understand why you chanted the Shiva Sahasranam, but not the Vishnu Sahasranam, because you're Vishnu himself. I mean, why would you chant about yourself? I realize that. And even as you see me, I see the beauty of, I see the entire Vishnu Sahasranam like an amalaka fruit in the palm of my hand. Why is this reference to amalaka? Why not papaya? Why not a mango or anything? It's interesting because this Hastamalaka, again, he was thought of as a dull-witted boy who never spoke, another thing. And the father brings him to him, and he sees Shankara. He says, he starts to speak. Again, the father says, okay, he's been cured, and therefore takes him home. He stops speaking again. He brings him in front of Shankara, he starts to speak. So that is when, they realize that Hastamalaka is speaking only in the presence of the Supreme Being himself. He has already, Hastamalaka is when you place a Amlaka fruit, it is one of the few fruits because it's so perfectly round and circular that the whole fruit can be seen. Except for the small part that touches the ground or touches the palm, the rest of it. That's why they say the Amlaka fruit, that I can see it in most of the reference. They will say that I see now things are clear to me like the Amalaka fruit in the palm of my hand. That's the. Then there is also the story within a story why the Sringeri Matam has got such significance in other things. Now, of the the Paramacharya also speaks of. In fact, the Paramacharya says why the Sringeri Matam. The Kanchi Paramacharya says why the Sringeri Matam is so very important. Why is it that it's such a divine matam? He says, and the Kanchi Paramacharya is a very interesting story to say on this. And the Kanchi Paramacharya also hints at multiple things where he says that, in addition to these matams, there were several matams that had been created and many were actually lost. We speak of only these 4 matams, but there were several other matams, and most of these matams may be, why the Sringeri matam is so popular? Now, for example, the Badrinath Matam in the north, Shankara decided the place. Dwaraka or Somanatham, Shankara decided the place. Jagannatham or Puri, Shankara decides the place. By that logic, it has to be Ramanatham, right? South, that should have been this one, but it happens in Sringeri on the banks of Tunga. So this is why this is the one matam that Shankara could not choose. He could not choose where he wanted to make the matam. The story is that, as soon as I will end with this little anecdote, that as soon as Ubhay Bharati, who is Saraswati herself, loses to Shankara, it's all a leela, right, of Bhagavan. Here there is no victory, there is no loss. This is all the leela that is being played, the Atara leela that is being played out. He says, my role is done. And he says, she starts to go away, fly away and says, I want to go back into go back to where I came from. And, but Shankara, wants her to stay for some more time. So he says, you have to stay here, but she still wants to go. Therefore, he binds her with the Vanadurga mantra. He says, no, I will not let you go. And then Saraswati says, okay, I don't have a choice. You bound me by Vanadurga mantra. I will follow you and Mandana wherever you go. But I have also in that sense taken up sannyas. But there is one condition. You will never ever look back. You have to go. Shankara agrees to that condition. He says, I want you because you are Vidya Swarupini. You are the Vidya Swarupini, so I need you to be with me. He says, till the avatara ends for me. But see how the Leela again plays out. They start going, and Shankara never looks back because he has agreed, right, that he will not look back. Because the moment you look back, I'll disappear. So he never looks back because he knows that she's following, because the sound that her anklet makes, there is the little sound, so he knows she's following. But on the banks of the Tunga, the sand is wet, and therefore the soil is wet, and therefore for some time he stops hearing the sound of her anklets, and he starts to worry: is she really coming? And therefore, instinctively, without thinking of it, he turns back, and that is when she disappears. That place is Sringeri. And therefore, Sharada decided that this is where I will be. And therefore, the Sringeri Matam is so very divine. And that is why, people come there. And that is why, the beauty of the Sringeri Matam is Shankara did not decide where the Sringeri Matam would be. It was Sharada herself. And that is why it's a Sharadamba Matam. She decided that she would stay here and not go to Ramanathapuram, for example. Ramanatham, as we know, going by the same logic of Badri, Somanatham, and Jagannatham, Puri. So she decides Sringeri, and therefore, since Saraswati herself decided that she would be there as Sharadamba, that is why for all Vidya, it is Sringeri that is so popular. And this is not me, and this is Kanchi Paramacharya's discourse on why it is this particular place is why the importance of the Shankara Sringeri Matam that he speaks of. So I think I have about 7 minutes, so I'll stop here.
Thank you, Ramesh, for this wonderful, very fantastic re-engagement or engagement, I should say, with the Shankara Vijayams over the past 4 sessions, and I'm eagerly looking forward to your book on this, Shankara Charitham. I think most of us, would not have gone through even one of the Digvijayam, much less through these many different Digvijayams that are present. So one of the greatest use or utility of these Shankara Digvijayams is that it helps us to, emotionally connect to Shankaracharya as a person, as a teacher, and irrespective of how accurate the hagiographies are, or which aspect is actually historical, which is not historical, I think these debates do not matter for a Astika. The purpose is to increase the Shraddha. So I think, and I think Shankara Vijayams also have a great philosophical content in it. So you brought all this out in a very beautiful way, very wonderful way. So thank you very much. Viewers, if you have any questions, Ramesh ji will take it up now. We'll just wait for a few minutes. So as we wait, Ramesh, I have one question. If you have to kind of summarize Shankaracharya's life as depicted in Digvijaya, or if you have to take home one message, so to speak, what would that be for you as at an individual level?
It's very difficult to say what is the one message, but I think all of us, speak of dharma, of protecting dharma and all of that. Here is somebody who came at a time when things were much more difficult for dharma itself, I believe. And in the first episode, I mentioned how there is a kind of a repetition of or a repeat of that kind of a situation right now when dharma is actually under trouble. And here was somebody who did not, think of what would happen. It's only when you start to read the stories you realize how much difficulty that he went through. Be it the debates themselves or the threats to his life. And when you particularly read the arguments with Mandana Mishra, just imagine a young boy who has just lost his mother is called the filthy son of a widow. Those are the exact words. I didn't mention it today, but that's what he's called. who's wearing filthy rags, but he still is smiling. He's able to, take all of these things because his only purpose is that he wants to establish dharma. I think Shankara's greatest contribution or the greatest message that we can that I take is that, beyond inspiration, beyond all of these things, I think if you actually, so many management gurus think and it shall be possible. I think he did not think or anything; he simply did. What he achieved, it's almost impossible to put into word, to capture into writing and other things, because what he did and what he is. That's why, I started to read the story. Because one of the things we seem to do with Shankara is to read what he wrote, but we don't read about him. I think it's very critical for us to also read about him and to get to know the many stories that inform us about who he was, because we know what he did. But I think it's also important to realize who he was. And if, in fact, after his mother passes away, to go back, against all rules. They say only 2 people attended the, when his mother was lying, when he reached his mother's dead body, there were only 2 people from the Nambudri community who were there. One stood near the feet and one stood near the head. And this young boy could not even lift the mother, and all of them refused, saying that the sannyasi should not come back. Therefore, he had to cut up his mother into pieces and carry her himself. And that is why till today, there is this particular sect of Nambudris who, when they perform their last rites of their whoever, will make a small cut in the body before they do it, because they say it is a curse that came in and continued.
I think one of the questions is that we find in Digvijayam, but also in Sthala Puranas, many temples about how Shankaracharya kind of did a Jirnodhara, kind of renovated the place, renovated the vigrahas, and did all the things. But some people also criticize this, that he changed the ritual practices of the place. So, in your reading of the Digvijayam, have you come across incidences how it has these things have been portrayed there?
Yeah.
And any cause for
there,
why Shankaracharya did what he did?
Yeah, well, 2 things they mention. They do mention this, why he did the Jirnodhara, and also he says they say that most of the murtis had become Ugra murtis. Many of the murtis, one, because of the persecution that second, also the failure to follow dharma. Many of the basic ritual practices had ended. People had strayed away from dharma and all of this. Many of the murtis had become Ugra, and that is why he had to do all the Sri Chakra Yantras and all of those things to ensure that the murtis again become Shantam. And did he change the practice? In fact, there is that question is actually answered in one section of this one that I remember reading long back, where they say that, one of the criticisms is that Shankara changed the practice, but he says that in some places where he did not, for example, I don't remember the exact place, but for example, there the Shiva Puja was not done by traditional Brahmins, right? So one of the accusations is that he did. In fact, he said, no, if that is the practice, let it continue. I am not very keen on changing it. So I don't know from where this accusation is coming. In fact, they mentioned, the Digvijayam says that in that particular place, he said, okay, the Shivacharyas are doing it. They're called Shivacharyas, and I think it's in southern India only. Shivacharyas are doing, let them continue. But what he apparently did, the Digvijayam also says, is to say that they seem to have lost some of their structures, practices, and rituals, and he sat down and taught them, and they were free to, and they were open to accepting it. So I don't see where this one is. And they say that he had no choice but to do this, because many of the murtis had become Ugra, and many of the practices had been forgotten. So he had to redraw, restructure, rewrite, and all that. And for example, even Ramanuja had to do that during his time in. So he had to. Ramanuja, in fact, wrote more. He said, "This is how it will be done." In fact, there were such strict instructions that he wrote down for how a worship of in a temple would happen. So yes,
we had one talk in this festival which mentioned about similar things by Shankaracharya as well. In some Nepal Pashupatinath temple and some other temples where Shankaracharya wrote down how exactly the worship has to be done. So this is an interesting parallel with Ramanujacharya as well. We have received just one question, Rameshji. It says that very interesting research of yours. Shankaracharya left at early age. Was it because he had finished his work? Out of many works, which are most critical impacts he had made, did he declare anywhere that he might take birth again? I think three questions and one question.
I will answer the first one. Age, I think I covered in the second episode, third episode. The thing is that, when Shivaguru and Aryamba do the Vratam and, go to Vadakanathan temple for this one, Shivaguru in the dream is clearly told that he is given a choice. You can have a child who will not be very brilliant, but will have a long life, or you have one person or a child who will live for a very short time, and but he'll be brilliant. So Shivaguru clearly chooses, and the time and the year is given is only 8. 8 years he'll pass away. That is when some of the rishis, when they come and say, okay, 8 years is too short, double it to 16. Then he has the debate with Vyasa, who doubles it from 16 to 32. So he had to go at 8 years. So there was a 4-fold increase in his age. So in that sense, and also he had completed his work, because they say by the age of 29 he had become a Maunamuni. He said, I had nothing to do. And in fact, Kumarila himself, he says, Digvijayam, he says, I am not at all interested. I finished and I want to go. But Kumarila says, no, you still have Mandana Mishra and all of that. Finish that and then go. Otherwise, your Digvijayam will not be completed. And then the Sarvajnam also happens. Of the many works which are most critical, I think all works that way are critical. Some people say some of his works are not his works. They're only attribution of those things. I find that most of his work, I don't see, I have not read anywhere where he has mentioned that he will be born again. Because he is Dakshinamurti, who was not at all keen on coming to as an avatar. He was only interested in that, staying in that state of supreme Mauna. And therefore, I don't think he has mentioned anywhere that he will take birth. But he has left behind a lineage of the Acharyas that is unbroken.
I think, the traditional belief is that each Acharya in the lineage is
correct.
Yes, Shankaracharya himself, or a representative, however you see it. Okay, wonderful. So one last question, Rameshji. Apart from your forthcoming book, will you recommend any other good biography of Shankaracharya in English?
Yeah, I think the one Madhava Vidyaranya's book, which has been translated in English by Swami Tapasyananda, that is available in the Ramakrishna Math. I find that a good translation. That is a good one. And then if people can buy volume 5 of the Voice of God, there are 700 pages of where Paramacharya primarily draws from the Digvijayam, Shankar Madhavi Digvijayam. And he also, I think these two books I found extremely useful. There are other books also, I think, but these two I find. Swami Tapasyananda's brilliant translation. Any Ramakrishna Math, you will find it, and which is a small book published by the Mylapore Chennai Ashram. Other one is the English, it's Voice of God, volume 5.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Ramesh, again
Thank you.
for this wonderful series of talks. And it is a very excellent summary. An introduction gives a taste of material in Shankara Digvijayams, but at the same time, it also gives a glimpse into how, in a very beautiful manner, these stories can be retold using the conventions of today, using the terminologies of today, and making Shankara all the more dearer to today's audience, contemporary audience, to help, in a sense, to connect with the great teacher for the today's audience. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to Indica Moksha, and thank you to all the who came. Thank you very much.
Yes, with this, we come to the end of this session. Please note that we have another session today evening at 7 p.m. It's a special weekend talk by Swami Vedatattvananda Puriji, who will give us a presentation of the Ekatma Dham project, It is a project which is currently underway in Madhya Pradesh, undertaken by the state government of Madhya Pradesh. So Swamiji will be speaking about this project and what all the activities is there, the motive, the vision, the mission, and other aspects. So do join us today evening at 7 p.m. With this, we conclude today's session. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.